Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session. Thank you for being here. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Well, I'll introduce myself. I'm Maria Gracia Aguilar from Fundación Adina. And today we'll have a packed agenda on the climate and care nexus. We'll start, we'll have two roundtables talking about why is it important to explore this intersection between climate and climate resilience and care, and a second roundtable on how can we integrate care into climate resilient policy and projects, as well as a conclusion and a few next steps. If we can go to this next slide, please. So today we wanted to share this session with you to unpack this care and climate intersection as a way to strengthen climate resilience through recognizing and addressing the unequal distribution of care work. In order to discuss how we can integrate care into climate policy and projects and highlight the importance of care as a climate resilience measure. We have organized this session through the Climate and Care Initiative, which is an initiative I'll talk a bit more about, but we have a lot of people here today who are already working on this intersection, and we want to learn more about how they're working on it and how they're integrated into actual actions around different parts of the world. If we can go to the next one, please. And I just wanted to do a brief review of this Climate and Care Initiative. We'll have a bit more information on the closing remarks. But this initiative is a new initiative this year that is looking to actually have a common understanding of what climate and care means, but also to map different practices that are occurring already on the ground. That we know that the climate and care is already occurring on the ground through different movements and different organizations led by women. We'll have some funding to help grow these practices and to generate evidence that can be applied to inform and engage national and global policy. So just wanted to do a quick review on this Climate and Care initiative. We'll share more information at the end of the session, as I mentioned. And now I hope you find this this different perspective and all of these different people who are working around the globe on the climate and care intersection and understanding care as a resilience measure for climate change. So now I would like to pass it on to Ana Moreno, who is the Technical Secretary at the Global Alliance for Care, who is also part of the Climate and Care Initiative or collaborating with it, and who will be moderating our two roundtables. So thank you for joining us, and Ana, I'll give you the floor so we can start the discussions today.
Thank you, Magra. Thank you very much, and a pleasure to join the conversation and to join the moderation. As you said, we have an exciting hour ahead of us, and we have really two interesting panels with three speakers each, and we are looking forward to hear from them in this really amazing topic that we have selected in the context of the Care and Climate Initiative. And the first panel, in fact, is going to focus on why it's important, this intersection between care and climate. And the second one is about how. So I ask you and I suggest you stay with us the whole hour because it's going to be a really interesting one. For those that they have not already realized, there is a translation available in Spanish and Portuguese for this webinar. So please just select your preferred language in the Teams window and you will have it there so that the translation is available. And I don't want to take much time of what Magra has already mentioned, the relevance and the importance of the present conversation as the world is increasingly coming to recognize the centrality of care work in sustaining lives, societies, and our planet. And obviously the need to recognize, reduce, and redistribute care work to achieve fair, equal, and sustainable societies. We know that this agenda has great transformative potential, which can help to tackle other critical development issues such as migration, labor rights, infrastructure, and our topic today, that is obviously climate change. We also believe it's a critical time towards COP30 in Brazil next year. A lot of things to happen also in 2025. Obviously, we have now in November the COP29, but we are looking forward to this milestone that will be next year in terms of climate with the COP30, in terms of gender equality with the Beijing +30 review, and other aspects that will be also happening in parallel next year. So with this optimism and with this potential for working together, as is the case of the Global Alliance for Care, in which in a way we represent this multi-stakeholder and multi-sectorial approach to care, I would like to start the conversation with the first three speakers, that we have asked them to focus on why it's important to explore the intersection between climate resilience and care. And I would like them to talk for 5 minutes each. As I said, we have 1 hour, really strict with time, and then we will move to the second panel. But let's start with the first one, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you Francisco Cos, Senior Research Coordinator at the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development. Francisco, all yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Anna. It's really a pleasure to be here and share some of our thoughts on this really important intersection. I will make 4 points very quickly. The first one is that care and a healthy environment are absolutely vital for our survival as humankind. So the importance of this agenda is crucial to our survival, as I said. And there are 3 intersections that we have been examining on why it is important. And the first one has been widely explored, and it is widely known that women suffer disproportionately due to climate change. When there are any disasters or when there are some effects because of climate change, women will suffer more, and their care burden will be increased significantly. The 2 other causalities that I'm going to talk about are less explored. And the second one mentions why just transitions should take into account the differentiated effects on women and men. We talk a lot just transitions, but we haven't really explored enough why it is important to have more equal outcomes. And just to give you few examples, right now, men hold about 70% of the world's polluting jobs. So one might think that they have most to lose from the transition to cleaner energy, but the reality is not like that. A very recent findings from the International Monetary Fund show that women are also at risk of losing out over the course of the transition, even when they are not in the most polluting jobs. And that's because too few women study the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM subjects that are vital to the green jobs of the future. And women are much more underrepresented in green jobs, which improve environmental sustainability or reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The third causality I would like to mention is that investments in care might have positive impacts on resilience towards climate change. And we haven't explored that enough. But we know that when care facilities are built when infrastructure that might reduce or redistribute care work is well built, is in place, women will suffer much more less. And that infrastructure, because it's not destroyed so quickly, can have a much better effect on climate change. But I have to say that very interesting research is also emerging. And that is something that we already know, that having women in all sectors is important for the economy, for politics, and now for the environment. And again, recent research says that addressing the underrepresentation of women in green jobs has significant economic and environmental consequences. Countries with a bigger share of STEM-educated workers and stronger gender equality policies that include care tend to have steeper reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in response to climate policies. So having women educated in STEM or care or gender equality and the combination has a good response to climate policies. In these countries, emissions intensity is 2 to 4% points lower, according to the recent research that I was talking about by the IMF. So STEM education and the intersection with gender equality and care drives green innovation and gives workers the skills they need for green jobs. And here I would like to propose a very interesting area of research. If countries with a bigger share of STEM educated and stronger gender equality policies tend to have steeper reductions in greenhouse emissions, what would happen in countries with a bigger share of care-educated workers, men and women, and a stronger gender equality? I am sure they would also contribute to steeper reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in response to climate changes, because women tend to do that as a subsidy to the economy, as a subsidy to the environment. Women have always done some sort of work that protects the environment, especially those in the agriculture and in island nations. So these positive effects have to be explored more. And I'll leave it here because of time.
Thank you so much, Francisco. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure some of the ideas that you have already mentioned are going perhaps to be kind of transversal in all the interventions. And we are looking forward to hear also from Ankita Panda, who is the Senior Program Officer for Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality at the Asha Foundation. It's a pleasure to see you virtually, Ankita. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Anna, and hi, everyone. It's really great to see you. I wanted to take a few minutes just to talk about some recent research that the Asia Foundation has been conducting on the nexus of care and climate change in collaboration with Avena Foundation and IDRC. What we found through our research is that care and climate are indeed very interconnected. Climate change has very negative repercussions on unpaid care work, but also investing in the care economy can actually lead to climate resilience. Unsurprisingly, we found that data and evidence on this intersection is very limited, particularly in the three regions that we focused our policy brief on, which are Asia and the Pacific, Latin America and the Caribbean, and Sub-Saharan Africa. So we found that there was a lot of value in developing a policy brief that investigates the relationship between care and climate change in the three regions, identifies critical policy gaps, and finally offers actionable recommendations for addressing the care and climate nexus. Through our brief, we found three explanations or intersections for how we see care and climate change linked. The first focuses on how climate change intensifies demands for care work, and it exacerbates the nature of care work and also the amount of time that women have to devote to something that they find more meaningful in their lives, or their time poverty as the concept we refer to. For example, we've seen that climate change has negative impacts on health outcomes. Rising temperatures are leading to more heat-related illnesses. We're seeing how increasing floods and cyclones are leading to more waterborne and vector-borne diseases. As the climate continues to change, people are going to get sicker, and this will happen much more frequently. This means that in the future, there will be many more people who will need to be cared for, and caregivers, as we've discussed, most of whom are already women and girls, and in some parts of the world who spend about 4 times as much time on unpaid care, are going to have to spend even more time than they already do to provide care to these people. Our brief also provides examples of how climate change intensifies care work, including linking it to increased rates of gender-based violence, increased migration and displacement, as well as land degradation and food insecurity, all of which increase both care and domestic work responsibilities for women. The second intersection that we discuss is that climate change weakens existing care systems, which in many countries are already quite underinvested and not adequately meeting the needs of their populations. One of the more visible ways in which this happens is that climate disasters can damage critical infrastructure. For example, we've seen how natural disasters like cyclones have destroyed childcare facilities or schools, as well as the roads that lead people to accessing these facilities. And so when physical barriers prevent people from accessing care, again, the responsibility for providing that care falls on the shoulders of women and girls who are at home, who have to do this without any recognition or compensation. Climate change is also costly, especially for the 3 regions that we looked at for low and middle income economies, often forcing countries into debt to repair climate-related damage, which leads to deprioritization of investments in critical social protections like long-term care insurance or other types of critical policies. And finally, the third intersection that we looked at is that we notice climate adaptation and mitigation strategies, while they are very well intentioned, can sometimes perpetuate care inequalities if they're not developed with a gender lens. And just very briefly, we've seen how disaster risk reduction programs often overlook the disproportionate impact of disasters on women. To address this, post-disaster facilities could cater more to women's needs. For example, can they develop emergency shelters that can also convert into care centers where women can safely bring their children or their elderly family members during times of emergencies to help reduce their unpaid care responsibilities. And then lastly, just one thing that is very, very important for me to underscore is that it's not just climate change that affects the care economy, but as I mentioned, the care economy is also correlated with improving climate resilience. And this is really, really important to emphasize. The care economy provides essential support systems that become even more critical during times of crises. By strengthening care systems, especially at a local level, so really thinking about how can we invest more in community-led care systems, we found that this has enabled communities to better manage the impacts of climate change. So very quickly, I know that this is focused on the why, but it's difficult to just talk about the why without also jumping into the how. And our brief recommends a few key recommendations. Starting with how we must elevate the climate and care agenda by integrating unpaid care work into climate policies and frameworks like the Paris Agreement, which doesn't have dedicated language on care, for example. We also need targeted advocacy to ensure that care work is recognized in climate strategies. We need community-led interventions. I spoke about this a little bit, but this could include expanding community health worker programs to also provide childcare or elder care services, especially during times of emergencies. We could transform existing facilities to also serve as informal care centers within communities. We need much more investments in care infrastructure and solutions. This could include investing or developing more labor-saving technologies like clean solar cook stoves, for which we've seen data that this has actually promoted the redistribution of domestic work between men and women in certain contexts. We need much more research and data, especially in this intersection. For example, it would be good to have quantitative data that calculates the amount of time that women spend on unpaid care before versus after climate-related disasters. And finally, we also need to expand climate financing to include care systems. Care systems are crucial for community resilience, especially during times of crisis, and we need the financing needed that prioritizes resilient care systems and infrastructure. I'll just end by saying that there is a fundamental link between the act of caring for people and caring for the planet. Both are essential for human survival. Our policy brief highlights the need for immediate targeted attention to integrate care into climate strategies. And we're hoping that by addressing these interlinked challenges, we can not only build more resilient care systems, but also empower communities to better withstand the impacts of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ankita. And thank you for going to the how. I think Francisco has also done it in a way in the final comment that he did. And I just want to repeat how excited it is to have this conversation. As you said, we need more of this about the intersection between climate and care. Next year, I was referring to some big multilateral spaces in which we are envisaging to have this more open. But there is also, for example, the Financing for Development conference next year. We obviously have the World Social Summit. So we hope that we are gaining that space that is required to really highlight and bring the importance of the nexus between climate resilience and care. And with this, I would like to pass the floor to the final speaker for this segment, that is Sonia Zalatze, researcher at the Climate and Inequality Program of the Southern Center for Inequality Studies at the University of the Witwatersrand. So, Sonia, all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me here. I'm very delighted that this important conversation has been had in such a really important platform. Well, I was reading this morning about the youngest victims of Hurricane Helene that struck Georgetown in the US a few days ago. And they were two month-old twins who tragically passed in the arms of their mother, Kobe Williams. And I think this is an important story because it shows that now more than ever, we need to be caring for each other far, far more in the face of extreme weather events that are occurring more frequently. But what does this mean? Well, we need an economy that prioritizes care and provisions care services and infrastructures that are not geared towards, over extraction of natural resources, which is one of the leading causes of climate change. But we need an economy and a society that is centered on care. And had Kobe and her twins had access to safe passage, to facilities that housed her during the hurricane, they would all be alive today. And so from our research, the intersections between care and climate is very simply two ways. The one relates to the impacts that climate change will have on care, which has already been discussed in this panel. We know that climate change will have detrimental impacts on the organization of care work. And in many cases, climate change will exacerbate existing care inequalities and many other inequalities. The second relates to the impacts that the organization of care and this concept of care has on climate change. Care work, especially through caring for the environment and centering care in economic systems, will have far-reaching impacts in addressing climate change. And this causal relationship is crucial because for us, it goes beyond a general analysis of the impacts of climate change. So, not that to say that that is important, but it also allows for us for a structural view of the economy and society. A care lens entails a shift from viewing women as individuals, but rather points us to a system that is a function of power relations. And unpacking climate change from a care lens is crucial because it reveals the different ways that we are currently valuing care. And currently we don't even see, care in the literature sees person-to-person care and doesn't really broaden to caring for the environment, for example. So a question about, who has the capacity to care, who can receive care, and how we care mirrors critical questions that need to be addressed within existing climate change discourses, which is who decides what climate policy is most relevant, who participates in climate policy implementation and development. And because care undergirds both our ecological and economic systems, a focus on care means understanding and transforming a number of interconnected issues related to the conditions of care work, such as the impact of the privatization of public and social services that has on access to care, and how the erosion of environmental standards as part of you know, the deregulation of industries impacts both care and the environment. Other things that we include are things like the impacts of free trading agreements on labor standards and workers' rights, and the detrimental effects that austerity or fiscal consolidation has on the environment and the provision of care. With this in mind, just also to slightly go into the what does this mean? What would a climate change agenda look like if we had care more centrally focused in how we understand the causes and the solutions to climate change? Crucially, care needs to be socialized and not individualized as women's work, as Francisco has also mentioned. And for this to happen, we need the provision of public socialized care infrastructure and the reversal of fiscal austerity, which impacts the organization and provision of work. There's also an important connection between public investment for public services and climate policy. So when loss and damages occur because of weather changes, the most effective support systems are strong care systems. This entails long-term and consistent public investments in accessible care infrastructure. And we obviously need to increase the quantity and quality of care, and increase the number of job opportunities in the paid care sector. We also, as was also mentioned, talk a lot about the importance of financing and climate financing as seen also as care financing. And both care and climate financing need unconditional, long-term, sustained scale-up financing. And this entails, long-term core resources, especially for Indigenous communities that are practicing climate adaptation and management of land and resources. And to end off, I'm going to say that addressing both the care inequalities and climate change will require the support of activities that promote a more systemic and long-term approach to climate change, which should also be done based on very context-specific factors and involvement of local communities and traditional and Indigenous knowledges included. And I'll end there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sonia, also for bringing the relevance of why we are highlighting this interconnection, but already giving some of the hows and are connected to some of, as I was mentioning, some of the topics like investments. The three of you obviously have referred to it. Infrastructure, obviously you have also referred to it. And obviously also the need for more data and the need for this transformative vision. And Kita, you were mentioning obviously the transformation of how we look at care and how care is at the center of our policy and at the center of our development. So with this, I know that we could speak forever. We could even have different questions, but I think it will be for another time. I would like to say thank you to the three of you and pass to the next segment of the hour that we had ahead of us. We will have another 20 minutes with other three speakers, which will provide a bit more insights on how can we integrate care and climate resilience policy and projects. And since some of the speakers of the previous panel have already mentioned some hows, it will be also interesting for those that are coming in the second panel to perhaps talk at the global level, at the national level, but I would like also to hear from you at the local level in terms of this infrastructure, the resilience, integrated plans at this local level. So it will be interesting to hear from your side what you have already prepared, obviously, but a bit of connection to what has been mentioned by our three previous speakers. That would be great. And with that, I hope we can go ahead with the second panel. It will be another 20 minutes, 5 minutes for each speaker. And I'm looking forward to hear from them. We will have first Ambar, Climate Action Policy and Program Coordinator at Women Engage for Common Future. And we will also have other two speakers, Violet Chiwutse, Chair and Regional Representative for Africa at Huaro Commission from the Grassroots Women's Associations. And then we will have Janet Gurung, Executive Director at Women Organizing for Change in Agriculture and Natural Resource Management. I would like to pass the floor first to Ambar Climate Action Policy and Program Coordinator at Women Engage for Common Future. Please, Anne, all yours. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Anna. Can you all hear me? Yes, very good to be with you. I'm greeting everybody from Munich, where I'm based, and I will say a few words connected to my presentation, which I hope you can all see on the screen. Let me try and use the remote slide sharing. Yes, let me just tell you just a few words on our organization. Since we are a civil society organization, we celebrated our 30 years this year, and our network is composed of over 200 eco-feminist organizations across the world. Our mission is to conduct the change. Let me just make the slide a bit bigger, sorry. Yes, all right, yes. So to be a catalyst for change and bring the priorities and leadership of feminist women and all their diversities into policies, actions to shape a just and sustainable world, which we call our common future. So that's why we are called Women Engage for a Common Future. So we're here to change the agenda with policy and advocacy work that is inclusive and that brings grassroots organizations into decision-making at all levels. We're here also to change the power balance, and we're here to changing the mindsets. And this is going to be the motto of my presentation. If my remote, yes, let me just, oh, sorry, I'm going too fast. All right, good. So just transition and care work, how to integrate it into policies. So we've had some discussions and already some very good presentations explaining how the current economic models actually commodify and profit from life-sustaining care work, and that 76% of unpaid care work is carried out by women in all their diversity. So the care economy is really a service to our societies and our economies, and should be taken into account fully into climate policies indeed, especially as the care economy is a low carbon economy. And we've heard it from previous speakers, investing in care work delivers social, environmental, economic benefits. So once that is recognized, okay, thank you. Do we see here? Yes. How can we recognize the role of care work for economies and climate action? We can recognize it in decision-making, in text, in negotiations, indeed, and that is really important to have it as a basis to then spur and inspire policies at the national level and local level. We can promote better the co-benefits of investing in care by making them visible, by supporting them financially and politically. We can also challenge social norms and the gender dimension of care work and redistribute this care work, and also make sure that with a transformational approach, we can change from unpaid care work to quality care. And then, of course, adopt a broader vision of just transition away from fossil fuels. So we, as a civil society organization that is also a member of the Women and Gender Constituency, a very big coalition of organizations that carry the messages, the demands of women and gender activists in all their diversity into the UNFCCC, the climate policies and the climate COPs. We are working for just transition negotiations, for example, to adopt a much broader vision and to integrate the recognition of care work. I want to give you some examples from the ground, from the grassroots, that make it, I think, much more tangible and concrete what we mean. And these are taken from the Gender Just Climate Solutions, a program that we have been running at the initiative of the Women and Gender Constituency, but that WCF coordinates. And it's a program that celebrates and showcases grassroots initiatives that center gender justice into climate action. So one example of how to integrate care work into climate policies and climate action is from the Keystone Foundation. Bhavya George from India won the awards in 2021 when we were in Egypt, when the COP was in Egypt. And she is working with indigenous women in the forest of Kerala. Am I at the right level? Yes, as you can see, really basing her work on understanding and using indigenous women's knowledge in caring for ecosystems and bridging it with modern technologies to make them more accessible as climate solutions to a more diverse audience and also to decision makers, and enable a very precise local monitoring of climate and biodiversity impacts, as well as enable innovative systems for restoration solutions, for example, ecosystem restorations. So this is an excellent example of how you can really concretely support climate action that integrates care. The other example I wanted to give you is from another award winner of 2021 from Pakistan, Mr. Javed Hussain, with the Sindh Community Foundation. This foundation is working with cotton pickers from Pakistan, sorry. And these women cotton pickers are working in extremely difficult situation, taking care, of course, of their families, but also taking care of the landscape, the ecosystems where they are growing cotton in very difficult conditions, working conditions. And the Sindh Community Foundation has worked with women groups to improve their working conditions, to enable them to make their own advocacy at local and national level. For example, for specific working laws to be recognized in their national law, so that their workers' capacity can be better supported, their salaries, of course, increased, their working conditions improved, taking into consideration also the impact of climate change as working conditions become even worse when you have extreme heat waves and other climatic extremes. And I think my time might be a bit over to give you more examples, but I would jump very quickly on an example of Yokumi in Togo, where you see here, yes?
I think we are really, I mean, if you are quick with this one, go ahead, yes. But really, really quick.
No, I think what is important here is to understand how in different situations, different countries, different sectors, this is about the shea butter production, for example. Every time you will find women at the center of product transformation or caring for ecosystems, caring for people. And every time you see that they are missing financial support, political support. So these examples were just to give you a few ideas of how you can transform policies and take this into consideration. But I will stop here because I don't want to prevent other speakers from having the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, much appreciated, because as you said, the other two speakers, our two guests, are also bringing that different examples and experiences, and we want to have time to hear from them, but we really appreciate, and we are obviously eager to know more, but as I said, we will need to replicate and to thank our colleagues from the Resilience Hub to replicate these sessions, but thank you for that. And I would like to pass the floor to Violet Shidbutse, Chair and Regional Representative for Africa at Haro Commission. She's a grassroots woman in Nairobi. So Violet, please go ahead and bring your expertise to this second panel.
Thank you so much. Am I being heard?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we can
thank
hear
you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. I've really been struggling with the connection, but I thank God that I'm here. So I'll start with saying that I am a member of a global movement called Wairu Commission, which brings together over 100 organizations that are led with grassroots women. We are in 41 countries. I'll start with giving our context of care in Africa. Our work as caregivers, like my organization, Shibuya Community Health Workers, is born from that. We started our work as caregivers because of the huge pandemic that we all know, HIV/AIDS. When many people were sick in homes, that was during the social adjustment programs. So many countries were experiencing a huge blow in providing for the medical support when people were sick. So HIV came, and we found many people that were sick in homes that needed to get supported with care. So many of the grassroots women, we began our work by organizing to take care of this huge number of people that were sick, and then the orphans that were left behind. Some of the things that we have been doing, which really relates to this topic, is ensuring that families have food in all situations. And climate change has been always there for us, hitting us. We have a problem when, as women caregivers, we need to continue providing food for our families. Sometimes we are hit with very huge drought. We are also hit with very huge floods, falling back to back in these things. So as grassroots women, care continues to be a need, even more during the time of the climate conditions that are not favorable for us. So as grassroots women, part of what we have done to ensure that we support these families, we have been doing care as a form of promoting resilient communities, where we organize, we ensure that we are doing climate change adaptation practices that produce food to feed these families, to feed the huge number of orphans. Tomorrow, we will be having a campaign in a school which demonstrates how we are doing care. This school has so many orphans. The orphans cannot get food. The school has land. The land in this school has been degraded. Grassroots women caregivers started rehabilitating this land last year to ensure that this land can be fertile so that we can be able to plant food, which we began doing. We have done composting. We have done technologies that ensure that the soil can be degraded. We have done capping of water systems to stop erosion in this land. And now the school has food, sufficient food that is feeding the children, part of this school, 100 kids. And tomorrow we'll be launching, where we are bringing all the stakeholders on board to launch a school feeding program that does not just respond to healthcare, but nutrition, but also responds to climate change crisis and ensuring that land can be fertile and we can produce food during this time. So the grassroots women caregivers are always on the forefront. From pandemic, we learn so much, we organize together, and we will always look at what solutions we can be able to offer. What are the gaps that we are experiencing? There has always been a disconnect. That's why I really felt like if I miss this discussion today, I would really feel bad, because always there has been a disconnect. When people are talking about care, they refer care to health. They don't see the role that the grassroots women are doing in environmental conservation. If you come to this school and see the trees, the agroforestry trees, fruit trees that the women have grown in this school, the composting that the women have done, things that really relate to showing how we can ensure that we bring a holistic approach in care. We learn from what the grassroots women are doing to rehabilitate the soil, to organize the community, to bring everyone on board and ensure partnership, and also be able to provide solutions that protect the impact of climate change and promote good health for the people. So these things have always been in isolation. And the reason why these things are in isolation is, as caregivers, we are never brought to the decision-making table, to the designing table, to shape how care is supposed to be defined. That's why care continues to be pushed in health and not looking at the other part. We have just concluded a survey in Africa that was led by funds that we got from Ford Foundation, the Future for Workers, where we have been able to show the connection between care, social protection, and for us, social protection is broad. It even looks at access to land. It looks, because when you are talking about care and climate change, unless the women can access land to plan effectively, unless the women can be able to control and make decisions on how this land is used, we cannot actually be able to realize these things that we are talking about. This survey has really taught us a lot. We are disseminating the survey, sharing with partners on how grassroots women perceive social protection in the context of care, and what are the gaps, what are the partnership gaps, what are the partnership in policy, what kind of policies that we want to see. We even look at funding scenarios and funding landscape. How do we ensure that when we are funding, it is able to bring a holistic approach in supporting the organizing bit of grassroots women? Care relies so much on organizing for us as grassroots women. It's not just a blueprint where you are reading papers. Cannot be treated as a program. It has to be treated from a fundamental way of how do grassroots women live, build social fabrics. What are the physical spaces that they are able to organize? The offices. When we are funding care, we are counting numbers of people that are trained. For us grassroots women, we count stories. We count the impact that we are able to see. We count the number of households that are transforming because of care, because of food security, because of education, and those that can be able to address the challenges of climate change and ensure food can be sufficient irrespective of all scenarios. And even how we participate in recovery when we have floods. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Violet, and apologies for also cutting you off, but I really want to have time to hear from Janet Gurung, Executive Director at Women Organizing for Change in Agriculture and Natural Resource Management. And Janet, I just give you the floor because you are the last speaker and we are really looking forward to hear from you. Go ahead, please. We cannot hear you. Janet, I think you are muted.
How's that? Better?
Absolutely. Better.
Sorry. Okay. I'm the last speaker. The time is always limited, so I'll try to do it quickly. We're really delighted to learn about the work of others at this intersection. I mean, WOCAN has been for 2 decades working at the intersection of gender and environment, and we have not heard much attention paid to care, quite frankly. And just as Violet says, it's been understood as limited to homes and communities and not the environment. So we're really thrilled that others are thinking in the way we are. 2 aspects of care that WOCAN has been thinking about, how we think about it, is that care needs to be integrated into not just the policies and the investments, it's projects. Projects is where the money hits the ground, right? So that's where we have to see that there's some, it needs to be seen as a critical step into women's participation in climate projects. You have to enable them to have time in order to participate and engage. And I think that's not really well understood. This can be done through labor-saving devices. I think Akita talked about this as well. This is something you can use renewable energy projects, but you can also use regenerative agriculture, forestry projects. And you need often to have a gender analysis done so that you can understand what are women's care burdens and how do they would they best like to address those? So that's critical. So we're talking about cook stoves, there's also biogas, there's irrigation systems, there's water supplies. I think Violet touched on all of these. So I think that projects and project developers need to perhaps be incentivized to include these types of activities, or forced to include these activities, and can be convinced of the value in doing so if they don't see it right up front. It needs to be intentional. I want to give you an example, and I'll use the same example for the 2 points I'm making. There's a biogas project in Nepal that we work a lot in Nepal, and we became very aware from our associations with women's groups there that this was a project that was instituted by the government of Nepal, setting up biogas and toilet units around the country and measuring the carbon, selling the carbon to Europe, and never thought about women's role in this. We were hearing from women that this was having this transformational impact on their lives because of the time saving, because women no longer had to work to carry the wood fuel. So I would like to say here that this was a case where it was not intentional, but it had this tremendous output. And I think there are many climate projects where we could point to that on the side are having these kind of impacts that we need to draw attention to. And in our case, we used W+ standard, which is Wokan's certification framework that quantifies women's empowerment results at the community level. And we found out that women save 2.5 hours of time every single day of their life. And that didn't even talk about the health impacts and being in a clean kitchen, et cetera. So that gave them a clean energy source. Of course, the question needs to be asked is, once you relieve women of that care burden and you provide them perhaps with leisure time, what happens to that time? How is it used? Is it actually become productive, or does it allow them to take a nap? Or does it allow for that redistribution of work burdens that Akita also talked about? And that's a critical thing. The second thing we like to think about is that it's really critical that we recognize, and I even want to use the word compensate women for their contributions of labor and knowledge into these systems. See them as not just providing free, unpaid care as they do for everything else, but if they are having impacts on the environment, which I agree we need more research to show this, but why can't we think about paying them, compensating them for the time they spend in doing this? Again, Wokan works with women's groups that are putting in free labor for managing forests, for managing water supplies, as Violet said, for managing soil resources. There are systems of finance and climate finance that are rewarding communities and people who are doing this in the carbon markets. For example, why can't we see that women are also compensated? We do that with our W+ standard. And in the same case from Nepal, we created, from our measurement of the time saving, we created W+ credits, which are sold on the market. We sold the market credits. We gave the money to these women's organizations in Nepal, and that money is to be used by women for whatever they meet for their own self-determined needs. We just watched to see what they did with it. What they did with it was used it for climate adaptation activities. They diversified their kitchen gardens. They built water supply systems. They put more money back into their savings and loans, which is also a critical part of climate adaptation. So I think that's just where we've seen a way to actually do it. And I think to find ways that we can use financial mechanisms to not just talk at a global level about we need more investments. So what? What does that mean? It translates into projects and activities like what Violet is describing, and we need to measure it. We need to monitor it. We need to compensate women, and we need to let it be known that that compensation needs to be for them, for their self-determined needs. I'm going to stop there. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you so much, Annette. In fact, for kind of summarizing, as you were talking, I all seconded in terms of, as you were saying, what means all this investment in infrastructures and these policies. What do we want to? What is the transformational vision that we are talking on these multilateral spaces? How they are transforming the realities of our women and of our planet. And I would like to invite that we keep conversations towards COP30, but also towards the International Day of Care and Support, that is the 29th of October, that I think it could be a great month. And in fact, today it's the 8th of October. It's a great month to start really this push for talking about care and the nexus with climate resilience. And with this, I would like to pass the floor for the closing remarks to Carolina Robino, Senior Program for especially at Canada's International Development Research Center, IDRC, with whom we are collaborating in this Care and Climate Initiative together with Fundación Avina and UNRIS and others. And Carolina, closing remarks, and thank you for inviting the Global Alliance for Care for being today here. Thank you.
My pleasure, and thank you, Anna. It's really an honor to represent Canada's International Development Research Center in this event today and share some closing remarks of what I think I heard from the insightful contributions of all of you. I was planning to share quickly about IDRC, but I think we don't have time, so I also invite you to look in the website about the work we do. But I just wanted to highlight that in IDRC Sustainable and Inclusive Economies program, we are mandated to support a feminist just transition. And to do that, we need to recognize that addressing the unequal distribution of care work is central to climate justice. As our session and speakers have argued and shown, climate change is raising care demands and weakening care systems. Additionally, also as Ankita and others commented, many climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies, programs, and policies are, in some cases unintentionally, increasing care work, which often exacerbates gender inequalities. And this cannot continue. We have seen through today's conversation that climate change resilience and care are intrinsically linked, making communities and families less resilient while maximizing the burden on women and girls. We heard about concrete examples of how women and girls are working to help their communities and ecosystems adapt to climate change impacts, assuring food and water security for men in Latin America and in Sub-Saharan Africa, and also with examples from Asia. This is why it is crucial that we integrate care into climate adaptation and resilience policies, action plans, reporting, and financing. And despite progress in integrating gender equality into climate change programs and policies, the link between care work, climate change, and environmental sustainability remains invisible. And that's why at IDRC we are supporting the Climate and Care Initiative that you heard about today, which is unpacking these links with the goal of broadening climate action to include the essential contributions of care work in building resilient communities. As you also heard today from Sonia, IDRC is partnering with the Southern Center for Inequality Studies at the Wits University in South Africa to deepen the understanding and build the theoretical foundations around the connection between climate change and care work. This foundational work aims to integrate gender equality and care into climate change discussions and actions. So, as I hope it is really clear after the session today, investing in the care economy is both a social and economic imperative, but also crucial for climate resilience and sustainability. And I wanted to close with an invitation. As part of the Climate and Care Initiative that we support, we are launching a new fund by the end of this month to support and visibilize grassroots organizations, NGOs, and feminist movements of the Global South that are working on the climate and care intersection. As Violet reminded us, this role of grassroots caregivers is key for sustaining life. Is key for community resilience, is key to build social and natural fabric, and this is not recognized, in part because caregivers are not brought to decision-making. And as Jeanette also highlighted, addressing care is a critical step to ensure participation. And an environmental and climate change initiative need to be redesigned to consider care and be intentional about this. So I think we have now shared in the chat the link to the Climate and Care Initiative, and I invite you to sign up there to receive news, including from the launch of the fund. So let me reiterate. We need to recognize the fundamental contribution of care work in resource allocation processes if we want to build a transition that is just. Thank you all, our panelists, our fantastic moderator, to the Resilient Hub organizer, and to all of you for joining us in this event today. Thank you so much.